Hey everyone, welcome to GTM Field Notes, Syft series where we talk to GTM leaders about what is actually changing in the field, not the theory or the LinkedIn hype, but the actual blood, sweat, and tears and lessons that show up in real revenue teams. I'm Imran Patel, CEO of Syft Data. At Syft, we spend a lot of time thinking about how GTM teams operate and how GTM teams separate real buying signals from noise, and more importantly, how they act on the signal before it goes cold. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Hahn, and we have Paul Sial, who leads marketing at AbroadWorks and Olami as our guest. And I'm excited about this one because Paul brings a different angle than some of our guests. It's not just a conversation about AI tools. It's a conversation about the future shape of the GTM team, like what gets automated, what gets handled by talent in-house or global, what's the strategic. So super excited about this one.
Thank you, Imran. Again, I'm Andrew Hahn, go-to-market revenue leader in software. Paul, excited to have you here. You and I collaborated a few weeks ago, and it quickly went from our main point of topic to nerding out on all things go-to-market AI. From what I know about our relationship, we obviously met through Pavilion. You're a chief marketing officer. You've operated pretty much at the intersection of finance, analytics, marketing, and growth. You've done the big names like IBM, but you've also done companies based out of Toronto, like Vena Solutions, AlayaCare, and Hostaway. We're going to get practical today. We're going to talk about how AI has really changed your go-to-market approach. 20-year plus seasoned veteran, but what's really changed in the last 6 to 9 months, how you're producing with smaller teams and creating enterprise level impact, how the global talent has really shifted with the economic growth. Really get your advice on go-to-market leaders and what they need to understand that's real and what high performing candidates want beyond the salary. So I gave a high level overview. Paul, please educate our audience on who you are, your chief marketing officer, awesomeness, and why you're here today.
Well, thank you both for having me first and foremost. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's always nice when someone wants to pick your brain. My wife certainly doesn't ever want to talk shop, so I get this avenue to do that. I think you nailed it on the head, Andrew. I've been fortunate enough to be a former IBMer when that meant something about 20 years ago, and I have formal education in digital analytics from MIT, and I've been fortunate enough to be part of 3 unicorns, Canadian unicorns, but they're still unicorns nevertheless.
Tell us about them.
So I'll tell you about them. So each of them is in a different area.Ey're all SaaS companies. And I think the first company I was at was sold to IBM. So that's how I ended up at IBM. And those early solutions that I was involved in were primarily sold to the Department of Finance. They were FP&A solutions, and that was when SaaS was first emerging. And then I went into home healthcare and vacation rental, property rental technology, all SaaS-based solutions, all billion-dollar valuations now. And in each of those roles, increased responsibility to my current situation where I serve as marketing lead. On a personal note, I'm a cancer survivor and recent father. And once you've been part of a couple of unicorns, I think you both can relate, and probably our audience can relate, is that's what you want to do again, right? It's like a drug. So then that leads you to a lot of places maybe that you didn't expect, or tumultuous journeys, because you're joining these early stage organizations where process is not set in stone. It's very ambiguous. And so that can lead to a number of interesting anecdotal stories that emerge, and just a tremendous feeling of accomplishment when you build something from scratch, right? So I've been fortunate enough to do that a few times. I currently serve as CMO at AbroadWorks, which is a 500-person organization, still a small business. And we are launching a technology, to Imran's point, called Olamee, which is at the intersection of EOR and ATS. And timely, because we're going to talk about AI and go-to-market. And so what I have a unique perspective is a lot of our clients hire AI resources through us. So I have a view into the way that North American companies are looking at sourcing AI resources. What types of AI folks are they hiring, and where in the world you could find these people? It's a completely different model than probably existed even 6 months to a year ago, because AI resources are few and far between, and they're expensive in North America. So certainly I can shed some light on some of the opportunities that exist to find these people internationally.
And so is Olami in the same space as like a deal, or like it's probably more specialized?
It's a little bit more specialized. It's in a similar space. We think that one of the shortfalls of the existing EOR market, like deal and remote, we're very fast-growing companies, first of all. So the idea of hiring people, the best person in the job, wherever they are in the world, is a big idea that I think a lot of organizations are wrapping their head around. Now, where we're different is we help you find that person. So a lot of those services, software/services, operate on the premise that, hey, you post a job, and you end up getting a candidate in South Africa, and you like that candidate. So now how are you going to hire that candidate? You call a deal, you call remote. So what we built is an ATS technology that's purpose-built for international hiring, and it's on the front end of that. And then we have the EOR on the back end to make it compliant. So we're taking a little different approach, trying to get in earlier on the journey. But the idea is the same. We are dealing now in a global marketplace for human capital, and there's a tremendous opportunity that exists. If you're not on that bandwagon now, you will miss out. Andrew, you're in California. Imran, I believe you're in California also. So how expensive great resources are there. And so there's a world of possibilities when you have countries with much lower cost of living, and talent is everywhere, and some of the cultural differences, some of the educational differences are shrinking, because I can learn everything that you can with the LLMs that exist today, even, right? So it's an interesting time to be alive.
It really is, and I appreciate that. So we've talked about your organization and how you're helping companies. Let's think about your role specifically. Let's talk about the ownership that you have and what you've been doing in the last 3 to 6 months that obviously would seem like a fairy tale prior, while you were rolling out CMO strategies with AI. So again, go to market in your role and what you've been drawn to in that last half year.
It's an interesting, like you said, interesting time, right? So we work with a lot of companies and we help them source resources. So over the last probably year, it's been tumultuous, right? I think a lot of organizations, you've seen some layoffs, certainly with some big names. I think a lot of organizations are rethinking their human capital strategy. What can they do with their existing team flanked with AI, right? So am I going to hire more people to do customer service, or can I run with the same team or even the same sales team, right? Do I build out the same, do I hire more BDR?
How can we produce 2x with half the resources?
That's right. And
that's the mandate, sure.
That's the mandate. And so we've been part of that, right? Because we work with a lot of organizations that are considering hiring people, and then they'll call us and be like, what, hold off on that, or we got to wait, we want to see. On the other end, you're seeing a tremendous demand for AI resources. Now, personally, I can see a couple of areas where the audience may not have vision into this, but because I'm in this unique position where I run a go-to-market team that's completely international, completely remote, my team is in 3-4 different countries, probably 5 countries now. And so there is a shortage of AI resources, right? And
just for the context of our audience, like, can you say a little bit about your team, like the go-to-market?
sure.
And I'd love to double down on that, because this is great. What I really want to learn, if you don't mind, is how your role and how your team's role have evolved and what you use in a hand.
So I run both the sales and the marketing team, so just to clarify on that. And we are a remote first, 100%. We don't have an office. We're based out of Dallas, but we don't have an office. So I've, since in my previous roles, always hired in office, always hired where I could come in every day. And then obviously COVID happened, and then that shifted a little bit. We went hybrid, and now ended up at this company where it's 100% remote. So that's one big change.
We could even pause there. Horrific COVID, but I think it really accelerated what was naturally going to happen with remote work. So that was almost step one of getting us ready for resourceful communication and collaboration.
Absolutely right, Andrew. And so you see a proliferation of technology that's emerged to help you run the global team constantly out, right? Like there's all kinds of tools that allow you to do even the water cooler talk. They create like the Minecraft type office situation, but it's all virtual. And you're absolutely right. COVID accelerated that. And then I ended up here. And with respect to my team, all of a sudden, I went from hiring in a 20-mile radius of my office to just really anywhere in the world where I could find these people. Now, there's unique challenges that come with that. I believe that you can get great people anywhere, especially like think about my team, right? I have content creators, so I have designers and I have writers, I have paid search experts on the team, I have video content editors on the team. All of those transfer well across geos, really well across geos. You could find better people at a much lower price point, making yourself much more efficient. If you're thinking about as a marketer, as a go-to-market leader, you're always balancing people with the cost of advertising, the cost of going to market. So I can now reduce the cost on the people side and focus more of the resources on the getting our name out there, on doing branding, on advertising. And that imbalance is much different than it was probably a year ago. And so aesthetic, like a video editing person, I have a couple of those on my team, and the graphic designers, it doesn't matter where they are, really, right? Like a great aesthetic is great aesthetic. And now it's a little different because I also mentioned that I run the sales team. Sales teams are still a challenge. You get a different experience when you hire locally in the US, selling into the US, than you do perhaps going into another country. So that's where I have seen a little bit of a different mindset, although you mentioned Deal, you mentioned Roman, you mentioned a lot of them are US companies hiring that we work with, hiring sales reps in Canada, right? For example, and they save 60% going into Canada. They don't lose any of that.
I've seen some startups go to Eastern Europe as well.
Yeah, Eastern Europe, you're seeing tremendous growth in Eastern Europe on these roles. So with the marketing roles that I've hired, I'm dealing with a landscape where I'm getting 1,000 resumes from all over the world because I've posted the job internationally. And then how do I vet them? With the visual roles, it's like, look at the quality of their resume, and that doesn't matter. Like, to me, that doesn't matter if they're in Toronto or they're in California or they're in New York or they're in South Africa, where I have 3 or 4 designers. So the only difference is the person in South Africa, for them, 40, 50,000 salary is beyond their expectations. Sure. And in California or Toronto, that you can't find anyone at that price point from fresh out of school. So you're getting the best of the best in those countries often at that price point because the cost of living and the access to jobs for them is much lower. So unlike here where more people, and also just from another perspective, you're impacting their lives in a really meaningful way.
We are 100% on board. And thank you for that. Look, that is the future of work and the future of efficiency. I want to pivot us back. I really want to focus. You talked about video production, how it's quicker and cheaper. How specifically is AI enabling your teams to produce better, faster, quicker?
That is funny you say the video, because that's the area that I'm the most bullish on as the most dramatic change. So I watched, it was in IBM, and I watched a commercial, an ad that I think it was one of the bigger companies, Lawson at that time, merging, and they had an ad where they were comparing them. It was an animated ad comparing them to SAP and Oracle. And the ad just blew my mind. The animation, this is like probably 10 or 15 years ago, this ad. I still stay with it, I still watch it sometimes. I show the team it, right? And so I remember looking at that ad and saying to myself, like, how much would this cost? And I asked some people, production, first of all, half of them couldn't do it, but the ones that could, they were like, that's going to cost you minimum 100,000 to 200,000. Obviously, we were these startups. And I was like, oh, that's going to blow my budget, my annual budget of one commercial. Maybe I do it, maybe I don't. We were really contemplating, but we thought it was price prohibitive. And now I have a guy, and he can create that video in 1 week. $500.
That's interesting. So,
and I think the, like, by the way, super bullish on the video stuff as well. And I think the on the AI side, it's not just like on the human aspect of it, but the AI systems themselves are actually pretty good at generating videos now. And Hahn is one of our bigger customers at Syft, and
that's excellent.
And one of their main things is just that a lot of that video production work is can be handled by AI. You still need a lot of human creativity to figure out like the actual script and production and on so on. But AI just helps you so much with the actual act of production and post-production now that there are like efficiencies. It's like the perfect space in which like both AI as well as AI gains as well as like this transferability of human skills, because you can use global talent pool for it.
You're absolutely right, Imran. And we use Agent, by the way, as one of the tools. A great product. And the new model is really good, by the way. So you're spot on that. You still need that creative element, but this guy that I've hired, he has no formal education, right? He's just a guy that's nerded out on AI video creation. And the only way I found him is like we put this post out in Asia, and he applied. And I just looked at his resume, but in itself, I just thought the resume, because I obviously see a lot of resume, I could tell was well designed. And then I went into his portfolio and I was like, this guy's doing Pixar level little sound bites, but he's just doing it for himself, right? He was not like he worked at Disney or anything like that, but he was producing that level of little videos and was blown away at. And so there's the two types, right? There's the Hey Jen, like the talking head video, but he makes many movies, right? He's telling stories. And the videos that he produces, even if you go on our posts on LinkedIn, you can see some of his work, but you would need like actors, you would need a studio, you would need weeks and weeks of pre-production planning, and
not just that, you would need revisions and retakes.
And so it's on that. You're right. That is a great example of where AI is changing the landscape, go-to-market team in particular.
So you found an all-star, and that's amazing. So when you look at the growth of production, whether it's video production, content creation, campaign opportunities, does this mean that you need fewer people, different composition and skill set of people? How are you reallocating the budget?
That's a great question. You would think overtly now I would need fewer people, but I like him so much. I've hired someone else like him too recently.
So you're producing more, you're producing 5 to 10x for a similar investment, obviously working on your brand, your recognition, your reputation.
Andrew, so a year ago I was sitting there and I was like, one of the tenets, obviously, as we all know, is like you need to be out there, you need to be creating a lot of videos, and that's a bottleneck. And I was like, I don't want that to be a bottleneck here. So how do we create a process where we're creating videos systematically? And I think that is probably one of the things on the top of minds of lots of go-to-market executives, is how are we going to produce all the video content that we need? You need to be producing video content every day almost. So how do you do that? So I was racking my brain, how do we create a process by which this becomes easier? And so I started to interview agencies in North America to help me. And what I realized is there was no way I could afford to produce the amount of content that we needed via one of these agencies, especially the good ones, right? It was going to still cost me on a retainer tens of thousands of dollars every month. And it was going to be a lot of work, meaning they was good, to your point, the revisions, I would have got to go back, there would be all this back and forth.
My background, I actually studied film in college. And the whole idea of storyboarding, inception to delivery was months. And you wake up in the morning with an idea and you can go to market the next day. It's crazy.
Yes, that is exactly it. Now, sometimes I think of the Seinfeld episode where he has a joke and it's the middle of the night, he writes it on a piece of notepaper and he can't read it in the morning. But that happens to me all the time, where I have an idea for a story or a video and I jot it down, and previously I had tens of these and they never saw the day of light, right? Light of day. And so now I have 2 people now that can create massive amounts of video content just on their own. And I'm adding to that team also, because now I'm so bullish on it that I can see there's a massive opportunity. We go back to the agencies and that model. I think within the last year, my mindset has completely changed from, I'm not going to work with an agency. I'm bringing it in-house and I'm going to hire this resource and he's going to be working for us, or she's going to be working for us, and they're going to be thinking about my business 24/7. And I can write down that note, give it to them in the morning, you can execute within the week. So what a game changer, right? In terms of like producing content, producing great content, telling stories, and getting yourself out there in a different way that you could never do before. Now, you imagine the demands on the content side are going to increase for all of us because we're going to have to deal with this burgeoning amount of content that's emerging from every nook and cranny. Every company's going to just be pushing that out. But it also is interesting because now you can compete with Fortune 500 companies, even if you're a mid-market company and you're growing, you have the ability to now create great content at that level, at the Nike level, right? At that inspiration.
So this is a very interesting thread, right? Because like what companies do nowadays is that a lot of them want to be lean. A lot of them want to just like get the job done, like somebody take care of it. And traditionally, there have been two routes to doing it. One is that you hire an agency, you outsource the problem, or you bring in-house talent. There is also like a third route now, which is that companies actually try to get the job done by also buying software that looks like an outcome-based service. Like a lot of AI companies are like that, right? Which is, for example, of those like in customer service, there are a fair bunch of them. There is like Intercom, there is Fiera, Decagon, like in that space. And so are you, as you figure out the shape of your GTM team, now obviously like the content example that you gave, like in that case, you brought it in-house. That's actually what your company in a way does as well or helps with. And have you considered a third option as well? Or
it's interesting now, our CEO and my partners are inclined to go in-house, but it's funny because we looked at Intercom just a few months ago. We were just considering Intercom recently, and I don't know the answer. I know I'm trying to say this for every organization, but it's not that hard now to build some of those tools internally if you have an AI resource that's pretty adept. Like they're pretty fast. So
when did you land on Intercom?
So we ended up we're somewhere in between. Like we had ended up buying a slew, but we are also building. We also built it, and now we're just testing those two,
like in-house versus build versus
which is going to deliver. And so to your point, like we were looking at like, okay, we're generating this website traffic. How are we converting off the chat to leads? And how does anyone on the call probably can relate? But we're like, how does the one we built, the AI model that we built for chat, which is 2 days, not work, versus the one that we purchased. So you're testing these two versus a live body, which when I started here, we had a live body doing the chat. We had a team after them. So, but I think that that's one of the interesting parts of go-to-market now with AI is that there's a lot of things there's a lot of software that you would want to build, or connections or automations you want to build, but the cost of doing so was prohibitive. So you never really put it out on the table, right, or organizationally. But now that cost is shooting downward. So now the possibilities, and if you really think about an environment where programmers have agents that are running agents, and one programmer might have 10 agents that are working agents. You can now, as an organization, say we can produce almost anything, and that's liberating in a way. Against, well, okay, we're gonna do an evaluation. Do we have a budget for it? I don't want to pay for this. Let's reallocate our funds somewhere else. So that part of it, you now start as a leader, starting to think, okay, well, anything is possible, and it's maybe even affordable. So what do we want to do? What are the possibilities? What are we not doing that we should be doing? And I guess that's a different mindset than we previously had, right?
I feel like build is a credible option now.
I think so. I think every organization can now build a lot of things internally. As we're seeing maybe with some of the turmoil in the markets around SaaS products and things that we're seeing today, is because I think a lot of people now are recognizing the option that if you have one coder with 20 agents or 10 agents, that coder can do a hell of a lot to move the needle.
So let me ask you this question. I'm really excited about it. You're talking about an old school SaaS guy. I love selling 3-year deals and having recurring revenue. And we've been joking lately that, man, 3 years, that's a huge commitment. So we're talking build versus buy. I want to do it position a different way. I'm seeing more buy and build in parallel. So people doing shorter engagements, and I wouldn't say leveraging IP, but taking best practices from what's working on what they're buying while building an internal and that A/B testing to see what yields more. Is that something that you're doing?
That's exactly what we're doing, Andrew. Like with the chat, that's a great example of it. But I'll tell you, interestingly enough, just on that buy versus build, what we're running into now, and I don't know if the audience is feeling the same. So we've been very AI forward. We've encouraged our team. I've encouraged my team to, if you're not on that boat, then you better get on that boat right away. And to your point, operate lean, do more with the team that you have. Now, what we've been realizing is AI takes a heck of a lot of credits and computing power. And when we started 6 months ago with this initiative to be AI forward, they weren't monetizing it the same way. Now, if your team is using Figma, like our design team is using Figma expensively or tools like that, they're running into, or even if you're using Claude, right, internally, you'll see every 12 hours, it's saying you ran out of credits. And if you start doing more and more, then you're running out of credits. Finally, they're upping and they're not going to have to monetize this in a way. So to answer your question, just to go back to that, we were on the build side to the utmost up until this point. We were pushing on the build side. We like building products, and even if they're internally overbuying. But what we're realizing right now, it's not an apples to apples or what we're, the cost of actually building things, even with AI now, is expensive. It's not like cheap. Now we're going back and saying, do we hire a person in some cases, or do we continue to use AI credits and then understand the cost of that? The other thing I think is concerning in some cases is you get hooked on the sauce, you're hooked on AI, your team is all, and then you're at the mercy, right? Because what you're talking about, Andrew, with the 3-year SaaS, your price certainty in that case, right? Now, when you're using tokens and credits, you don't have price certainty. I say to my team, build it, but then halfway through, they're designing a new site in Figma, and then halfway through, they realize, hey, we ran out of credits. I just gave you credits yesterday. So wait, what's going on? It's using more credits.
You're sounding like a dad at a video game place. I just gave you $20 for video games and you're back for more. So really interesting. It's the price certainty aspect of that is the argument for hiring an expert and having controlled costs, because the first thing your CFO is going to ask is how much is it going to cost. And as a CMO running both sales and marketing, you don't want to say, hey, we're going to save 50 grand a year and then come back and say, well, we spent 50 grand over.
You're absolutely right. And that's what's happening right now. We have a certain budget where we flag the team with AI, and we realize pretty quickly that those tokens it's eating up tokens a lot more quickly than we anticipated. And it's because a lot of the companies that are in the AI space have changed their revenue models. They need to monetize. They've invested so much, and as a result, that's trickling down to our team and probably a lot of other teams that now are entrenched in AI, but then realize, hey, this isn't free, or there's a pretty significant cost to this that we didn't account for. And we're at the crux of that. I'm sure a lot of other organizations are at the crux of that right now also, where they're realizing these AI tools are expensive. So you can build a lot of things in a world of possibilities, but then you do have to now think, okay, well, what is the actual cost of this? And when you look at traditional SaaS, to your point, which is my role also, Andrew, is I come from traditional SaaS, and we're trying to go to market with a SaaS product itself, but then those do seem like longer term, and you do now question, can they charge the same, like, for that solution, when now you have a competitor emerging like this, where the option does exist, and the customization, right? Like a lot of those SaaS products, especially on the go-to-market side, out of the box, they may be cheaper, but if you want to customize it to your business, how you do things, then the costs go up pretty quickly. And so it's attractive to say, well, let's use AI. Let's flank our go-to-market team with AI. And then you realize, well, we can get the customization, and quickly, but it's going to use a lot of power, a lot of cost that you may not have accounted for before.
And
have there been examples of that in your organization where you have tried to or you have bought things and it has just turned out to be much more expensive to customize and maintain?
I think if you've been go-to-market sorry, and every tool feels like I saw obviously the CRMs, every one of them that are out there. We all know the names. We've all used them, obviously, the HubSpots, the Salesforce, the Zohos. Out of the box, you realize that this is like what I saw in the demo per se. And now we need to jimmy rig this to get it to work the way that we want to. How do we do that? Then you call an agency again. Right. And the consultants are $200 an hour, or you go with the company itself and their consultants are even more. So you're left scratching your head. Okay, well then maybe we change our process to fit into the solution, but no one wants to do that. So now you have this other option where it's like, okay, well, we'll build an AI infrastructure. We'll use AI automation devs and we'll clean it up. But then to go back, then you're like, what's that cost? It's a little ambiguous still.
Briefly, you brought up the idea of CRMs. It's interesting to see there's certain industries or solutions that you don't want to be an expert at or build in-house. You don't want to build a CRM. Could you? Absolutely. But whether it's financial, HR, it's going to be interesting to see what changes in the next 6 months as far as longevity within verticals and solutions.
Absolutely. And that was, like I said, we like to build things. We have a big dev team and our dev team is offshore. So it's like cost effective to often build things. But even that, we didn't want to build a CRM, just we could catch up, right, to how evolved the CRMs are. Now, we do talk about it now is like with the AI, could we just build our own CRM? And I guess there's nothing preventing that. But I think, Andrew, then to your point is if you're in the tech space, then there's always an opportunity cost. So like we could build all of these things. We have AI resources, we have devs, but then does that drift us far off what we need to do to be successful for our business, our core competency, what we're selling, and how much does it drift off? But those are definitely questions that you ask internally in a different way than you did before.
It's the quote I used in a prior one is I sold to Sam Adams once and at C-level said, if it doesn't make the beer taste better, we shouldn't be investing in doing it in-house. Which I think is a great point. It's actually getting somewhat antiquated. How much better can that beer taste if we do it internally versus externally?
Yeah, that's a great quote. I'm going to use that the next time I see it.
What is the frameworks that you use internally? You said you discussed, so like, for example, you use HeyGen, you said, right? And you were evaluating on the customer service side, you were evaluating intercom versus something in-house. Like, would you build something like HeyGen internally? Like, what's the framework? At which point you like, are there 2 or 3 questions that you look at and it's like, this is like not, or like a strike zone and it's not worth even exploring the build option?
Well, price and critical nature of the solution obviously both come into play, and feature set, right? Like, so with HeyGen, obviously it's fairly cost effective. It's a great product. We could build something like that in-house, but then we're like, why? It's not worth it. What does it make the beer taste better?
Not going to make the beer taste better. Yep.
Not going to make it. Now, what's interesting though about that, Imran, is like HeyGen is known, right? And then this the AI person that we've hired. Now, I thought I was familiar with the AI video creation technologies. We know some of them are really popular, right? But then he brought up one that I'd never even heard of. He likes to use that. And then I realized these people that are AI forward, that are tinkerers in their basement, that know AI really well, and they nerd out into it. They have their own ideas. They have their own tools. They're off the beaten path. And so that's been an interesting discovery along the way, is that the people that are really into it, they just like reading about it all the time. Now, all of us, there's an overwhelming amount of content that's coming on our direction. I just telling someone on our team that I get so many newsletters and I saw so many of them. A lot of them are go-to-market related, and I was saying, I've got to go back to read this, and it's hard to find time to go back and read all of that, everything that's out there. So to your point, there's lots of content. A burgeoning amount of content is overwhelming, but I think that the people that are AI forward, they nerd out into it. They know the tools that they want. They're tinkerers in their basement, and it's hard to find those folks. But once you do, they can make a massive impact.
So you let them guide the process a bit in a way as well.
I try to empower them to get the tools. Like, for example, they like Figma, and they still like Figma, even though now it's merged into some AI front-end monetization model. But if you find people that are AI forward on your go-to-market team, then you want to give them the tools that they need to be successful. You don't want to box them in, especially the creatives. I feel like that's one place where I don't try to build. I try to give them what they need to be successful.
That's a great framework.
As an executive, anytime someone asks me, hey, I want to buy this software, my first question is, what problem is it solving?
That's a great question.
Followed by, how much are we going to save? One question we didn't have on our list is maybe you can talk about the process when people come up to you and ask for new AI tools. What are the questions that you're asking to, I wouldn't say ensure, but to increase the probability that this investment's worth it? Are there qualifying questions? Is there a checklist for
Similar to you, I was like, what is it going to do? Like, what impact is it going to
What's the outcome?
What is the outcome? And also, this is the way I approach it, Andrew, is like, and I've always done this because my former CMO trained me, is like, tell me what the outcome is and tell me what the criteria for the decision are, right? So I identify, okay, it has to have these features, it has to be at this price point, it has to do X, Y, and Z, it has to be user-friendly. So make a list of all of those things that it needs to have. And then don't come to me with one option. Come to me with 3 options and score it, right? Do a score and do a matrix. So I know, okay, that it's well thought out. Now, they always do the scorecard in favor of the solution that they actually want. But at least I can go to the CEO and the CFO and say, look, it's not just we need this, and here's how we've decided that we want to go with this solution over these other ones, right?
So
Sorry, Andrew, finish your question.
I think you nailed it. I love the idea of a matrix. I love your openness about, of course, there's going to be a biases, but it sounds like they're coming to you with not just, hey, this would be cool. It's a mix of both qualitative and ideally quantitative impact.
Yes.
And I bring up qualitative because you can quantify it and build out as many models as possible, but it also needs to be fun to drive.
Usability comes up often in that matrix, but I think just to go back to that point just briefly here is what we do on the revenue side, on the go-to-market side. We always have to defend sometimes our position because there's a lot of ambiguity. It's not like X equals Y and every time input-output relationship. A lot of the things we do we just are taking a stab at something. We're trying something. We're A/B testing something, right? And I think that experience with my former CMO was that if everyone wants to go back and say, why did we do that? First of all, you want to have the checks and balances, but you want to show there was some thought. Like it wasn't just this arbitrary, I wake up in the morning, I'm going to throw a dart at the day and say, let's hope this works out. These are all well thought out. And even if they don't work out, which they won't always, then at least you have a position you can defend.
Paul, we started this conversation talking about basketball, and it now sounds very similar. When a general manager wants to add a new player, there's quantifiable evidence of their production, but it's still a feeling on how they're going to fit within the team, how they're going to produce, and what the outcome's going to be.
Yes, and that's an interesting analogy. I was just watching the Jailblazers on Netflix, and they were talking about that very thing, bringing some people on the team with questionable backgrounds, how that would fit in. But I couldn't agree with you more. Certainly, because I'm on the human capital side, also meaning I'm hiring people for other companies and we're hiring ourselves. I see that all the time. There's 2 approaches. Sometimes company will tell us we want someone that complements our teams, like-minded. Like-minded, or they'll say I want someone that thinks completely differently. So we assess out, are they contrarian to the existing organization? And sometimes they want that because they want someone with a different opinion. And other times they want someone that's going to fit in and toe the company line and be a little less maybe like outlandish or different from the rest of the crew that they've assembled.
So one question that I want to get in here on this topic. So you said like when somebody on your team comes in, they come in with like a card of like why you should go with the solution or something. And those conversations, and one of the things that's changing now is software and labor budgets are merging in a way, right? Because of AI. So do those conversations then also go into like, is one of your questions also like, well, not only what problems does it solve, but who's going to own this, right? Who's going to produce outcomes from this? And then is it like one example I'll give you is that in our space, or like you said, HeyGen. So like, okay, somebody says, okay, we buy HeyGen. Somebody needs to be familiar with it. One example in our office is Clay, which has like a very famous like learning curve. So just the other day, somebody was telling me like we bought Clay and then we now have to figure out who, and so then we'll hire either an agency or you have to in-house get someone. So is that a thing as well where you are like now thinking not only about the tool, but actually human capital that can make the tool effective. Is that a part of your calculation now?
Super insightful. That happens all the time. There's a lot of cool tools. There's so many cool technology emerging, especially in the AI side. And when you see it, you're like, yes, this could help us for sure. Especially when you see a demo, you're like, oh, this is going to make an impact. But then it dies on the vine, because even if you buy it, like, who's going to use it? Who's going to actually extract something out of this or create something within it that actually moves the needle? And we bought lots of tools, lots of things that never see the light of day, because no one is around to actually own it. And then you're expanding your team. Like, do you hire someone then to manage that? And then you're weighing that out. And then so there's an incremental cost. We got the price tag of just the technology, but now if I add in the human capital element of it, then does it still make sense? Tough conundrum for a lot of go-to-market leaders, I would imagine, right now, because there's more technology than you can possibly take on from that front. You're limited. There's lots of things that can do very neat things, cool things, but do you have the internal capacity to actually realize the benefits of that solution? And that's where I think in a lot of cases it doesn't materialize the way that
you go with a vendor that actually gives you like forward deployed engineers. Like, if let's say like Fin or Intercom, for example, will give you like people that like just embed, and so like, would that be part of your calculus now, or will they add in-house people?
It's, I guess we've all like, that's an old problem that Andrew and I probably had with the SaaS business also, is like, we would sell things and then I remember selling $250,000 deal out in Vancouver, and then we gave them the services bill and it was $250,000 also, and then they pulled the plug on the whole thing, right? And so I think that my preference is to say I would like, because then, Imran, my perspective is that you will always need that, right? Every iteration, because you're not developing that in-house knowledge of how to use it, how to maximize the return on it. So you're never going to be able to wean off the vendor. And I don't like getting into situations where I'm reliant on the vendor indefinitely for this. Yep. So that's the reason that I don't like to do that, as I imagine many. But then obviously maybe companies that are flush with that maybe have a different perspective on it. But I imagine most people contemplate the very same thing, is then you'll never be able to get off of using that external party to, and you're tied to that agency, you're tied to that company.
Vicky.
Yeah. And so that adds a wrinkle to it that I don't like. And so it makes it tougher. I'd rather go in the direction of hiring someone that will manage that product, and then there'll be a learning curve. But then again, you're always then at the mercy of that individual. If they leave, then there's always a pro and con to it. But I'm more inclined to that, and then documenting it, than relying on the vendor and their team to constantly be doing updates and customizations all the way through your journey with them.
That's a very insightful point. So it's like it seems like you would be okay with recurring subscription costs on the software side, but recurring services costs are probably not as.
Yes, I didn't thought about it like that, but that is probably the way that I look at it. I don't like the recurring services. It's tougher to go to your CFO, to Andrew's point, and say, here's the bill for the subscription, but then there's this ambiguous, we may need services down the line at X, Y, and Z point, and I don't know what that will cost. It'll be based on the hourly rate that their team charges at that moment.
Well, I love this. These are the type of conversations that not only educate me, make me feel less educated at the same time. And I bring that up because we're talking about best practices. We're talking about doing it in-house, doing it, finding the right vendor. What are the costs? What are the variables? What are the constants? So you're a wealth of information here. So if I'm a founder, I'm a CRO, I'm a VP of marketing that's a little behind, and I want to build a leaner, more AI-enabled global team, what is your advice for them to do in the next 30 days?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to identify where you want AI injected into your organization and where things are not necessarily going well or could be more optimized. And then you start small, right? Like we see clients boil the ocean. They want to hire 5 AI people the next day. And firstly, time to hire is a misleading metric. Because quality of hire takes time. So you want to start small. You want to identify 1 or 2 roles where you want to inject AI and then have some quick wins. And yeah, obviously there's some decisions you have to make, whether that person is permanent, contract, or you work through an agency like ours. But that being said, all that is to say that if you're not doing AI and you're not thinking of using AI resources from a global perspective, like into hiring internationally, then you will lose to a company that is, because there's a significant cost advantage going in this direction, and there's a skill shortage. So on both those fronts, you really have to consider doing this.
I think that's a great point. And we are at time as well. And I think it's a great point to close on. This is a great conversation. It seems my takeaway was what we put down, which is that like both AI skill shortage and the accessibility of global talent just changes the shape of how you build out a GTM team and teams in general, it seems like. And so companies that can leverage both of them, like not just like from an outsourcing perspective, but also just like just exploiting that very, what I would say, like rare talent that we have or that we need right now. And they'll probably be very successful. So this is a great conversation. This is exactly why we do this podcast. Like I try to get like a lot of different like diverse point of views, just not like I'm a little bit on the tool side as well, on the AI side. But I think for me, like this conversation was a lot about how the calculus is changing in terms of like not just software, but also just like how you allocate labor and like how do you procure labor, so to speak, not just tools. So thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll have like a follow-up in the next few months when Olamee goes out, and like we'll probably have some more experience from the field, and would love to catch up again.
Love being here. Love talking to you guys. Made it easy. People find